Good morning, everyone. My name is Shunafaith P. Villarico from English 3B, and for today's lesson, we are going to talk about structure of literary interpretation and some questions structuralist critics ask about literary text. So without further ado, let's begin. Before we begin, let's first have a brief background about Mr. Jonathan Cooler. Jonathan Cooler is an American literary critic and a professor of English and comparative literature at Cornell University on 1916. His published works are in the fields of structuralism, literary theory, and literary criticism. The structure of literary interpretation are the set of rules and regulations that we have absorbed, whether consciously or unconsciously. It tells us how to generate meaning when we read literature, and according to him, structuralism is defined as a theory resting on the realization that if human actions or productions have meaning, there must be an underlying system that makes this meaning possible, since an utterance has meaning only in the context of pre-existent systems of rules and conventions. Cooler's approach asserts that our understanding of literature is based on the interpretive strategies we bring to the text. For example, most people know that a fairy tale is fictitious narrative and should not be taken literally. Although many of these principles and regulations are required in school, for example, the natural imagery indicates a lot about a work's topic. Structural's aim is to understand the fundamental structures that underlie all human experience and therefore all human behavior and production. So basically, to know basic patterns that underlie all life experiences and consequently all human behavior and production. As a starting point, Cooler's structural system may be described in terms of its key components, which include the convention of distance and impersonality, naturalization, the rule of importance and metaphorical coherence, as well as the rule of thematic unity. The convention of distance and impersonality. It is the mental adjustment the reader makes when we know we're entering a fictional world, and this creates a fictional distance, so to speak, that carries with it the kind of impersonality that would not be present if we knew we were reading a factual account of a human being's personal experience. It is an assumption we make as soon as we see that we are reading a literary work, even if that work is in the form of non-literary writing, such as a letter like Barthelme's story The Sandman, or a journal like Doris Lessing's Memoirs of a Survivor. And as soon as we know we are reading a piece of fiction or poetry rather than a letter or journal, we read it differently than we would read a real letter or journal. We know we are entering a fictional world, and this creates a fictional distance. So to speak, that carries with it a kind of impersonality that would not be present if we knew we were reading a factual account of a human being's personal experience. The convention of distance and impersonality is the code that enables all the following codes to come into play. The third one, we have naturalization. It is the process by which we transform the text so that the strangeness of its literary form makes sense in terms of the world we live in, wherein the reader employs to transform the rhyme meter, divisions into stanzas, acts, chapters, and interior monologues into terms that make sense to real life. So when we read, for example, "My darling is a ripening apple," we believe that the narrator is speaking figuratively. so that even as we convert the literary language into a concept that makes sense to us, we enjoy its beauty and weirdness. A narrator's voice is assumed to be heard, rather than the voice of the author, and any errors or biases in the narrative are attributed to the narrator's point of view. When we naturalize the text, we also learn how to comprehend literary components like letters and symbols by identifying codes. A person with good, clean complexion, for example, does not necessarily have fine, clear soul in real life, but we might accept this link in some types of fiction. It is the process by which we transform the text so that the strangeness of its literary form makes sense in terms of the world we live in. And now we are down to the rule of significance. It is the attention we pay to a literary work because we assume it deserves a higher level of scrutiny than other writings. Maybe there is more meaning in the text than is at first understood, and therefore it requires a closer examination. As a result, we pay attention to what it says in ways what we wouldn't with other forms of writing. For example, I've been to the antique store in quest of a lamp. Our spouse may write, and we'd probably take it at its value. Our spouse wants to buy an antique lamp. A four-line poetry of the same sentence would, on the other hand, provide additional resonance to the word I've gone, I'm in quest of, antique and light. Perhaps the poem symbolizes a yearning to escape an unhappy position in the present and return to a more enlightened past. Next, we have the rule of metaphorical coherence. The rule of metaphorical coherence is that the two components of the metaphor have a consistent relationship within the context of the work. In other ways, it means that the two components of a metaphor must have a consistent connection within a work's environment. A narrative of a poor, elderly Native American wanderer who falls asleep eternally under a cold sky would be a good example of this, while a pale, winter sunset may represent the character's demise and perhaps the end of an era. It couldn't possibly represent the peaceful sleep that precedes the hopeful start of an exciting new existence. And now we are down to the rule of thematic unity. The rule of thematic unity simply means that there must be a main point or coherent theme to the literary work. Thematic unity includes theme as a binary opposition, good versus evil, theme as a resolution of a binary opposition, good conquers evil, and theme as a displacement of a binary opposition by a third term. Good versus evil is absorbed by all-encompassing nature. We expect a literary work to have one unified, cohesive subject or major idea for this reason, which is the primary reason for the rule of metaphorical coherence. Actually, it is exactly because a literary work is expected to have thematic unity that we nearly always manage to locate it or, better still, build it in the interpretation of the text. We expect a literary work to have a major message for this reason. As a matter of fact, we anticipate a literary work to have a thematic unity. We nearly always discover it, or more specifically, build it when we read the text. Cooler thus believes that what we refer to as a structure of literature is really the structure of the system of interpretation we bring to it. According to Cooler's approach, our comprehension of literature is founded on the interpretative methods we use to the text. As previously stated, structuralists think that we create the world we perceive by projecting our consciousness structures onto it. When applied to literature, the outcome is the same as the reader response theory, which holds that we make the literary text as we read it. However, Coolers' structuralist approach is his asking, what is the structure that underlies the surface phenomena of our interpretations? And in order to uncover the solution, he investigates interpretation as a structural system. Cooler studies the language, the structural system of rules and codes that function, either consciously or subconsciously. When writers write, and readers interpret within the Western literary tradition as opposed to the reader's response theory. We are now down to some questions structuralist critics ask about literary text. To summarize structuralist approaches to literature, consider the following questions. Remember that structuralists do not attempt to evaluate whether or not a literary piece is good literature. Their primary interest is in the structural systems that support and produce literary meaning. How should the text be classified in terms of its genre using a specific structuralist framework, such as the ones studied by Fry and Scholes? Analyze the text narrative operations using a specific structuralist framework such as Greimas, Todorov's, or Genette's. Can you speculate on the relationship between the text grammar and that of similar texts? Can you speculate on the relationships between the grammar of the text and the culture from which it emerged? Depending on Coolers' theory of literary competence, what interpretive rules or codes must be internalized in order to make sense of the text? Depending on the text, it may be necessary to identify codes other than those given by Cooler. In other words, how can a particular text contribute to our understanding of literary competence? What are the semiotics of a particular category of cultural phenomena or text, such as high school football games, television, magazine advertisement for a specific brand of perfume, or any other consumer product, or even media coverage of a historical event, an important legal case, or a presidential election campaign? In other words, consider the non-verbal meanings sent by the text in issue, as well as the semiotic implications of linguistic tags like Desert Storm or White Diamonds, which is a brand of perfume. What exactly is being conveyed and how is it being communicated? We may ask some of these questions depending on the literary text or text in issue, or we might think of another question that's not on the list. These are only a few ideas to get us thinking about productive approaches to approach literature from a structuralist standpoint. Even though they adopt the same technique, not all structuralists will read the same text in the same manner. Even experts in the area differ, as they do in every other discipline. Our goal is to use structuralism to help us see some fundamental connections between the structures of literary text, the structure of literature, and the structure of language, and the structures of cultural phenomena of all kinds, such as literature, mythology, art, social rituals, sports, forms of entertainment, and advertising. The development of a systematic universal language to define the essential structures of literature allows us to draw clearer and more accurate comparisons as we strive to get a better grasp on the processes taking place in literary production and literary history. So, all in all, the point of literary criticism is to take us away from boundaries and to stretch ourselves into taking difficult chances that might not make sense at first, but really help us grasp meaning in, behind, or between multiple pieces of literature and poetry. Trying to grasp the meaning of a piece of literature is very easy. It is finding a specific and influential meaning that creates complexity in the search. But it is what helps us become more enriched with the literature, no matter whether it is the structure, the history, the culture, the nature of the literature. We gain so much from trying to expand ourselves rather than creating the same argument over and over again. The importance for myself is this. As a future teacher or as a future language teacher, the challenges of stretching a new meaning or relation into a text will help others gain a knowledge that they never thought they could ever gain. If that is not enriching, then I will never truly know what is it. I hope you learned a thing or two from this topic and thank you for listening.